Welcome to another episode of Relational Leadership and Conscious Cultures. I am your host, Candy Barone, and this is our space where we get raw, real, gritty, and we are challenging everything we think we know about leadership and how we are building cultures and teams. Because here's what I want you to realize: the old leadership playbook is broken. It is fundamentally flawed, and it is not designed to set us up into our next level of consciousness and our next level of how we are doing work in service to others, creating greater meaning and greater impact. Because the truth is, relationships are the new currency. And if you are not investing, really investing in your human capital, meaning your people, you are ultimately going broke. And so in today's episode, I want to talk about this concept of relationships being the new currency. I know I've had a couple people reach out as this podcast is just getting underway, asking me what I mean when I say relationships are the new currency. See, we have had a currency, especially in business, that has been all about the bottom line. It has been all about how much more we can produce, how much more we can get in, and it's all about a money in versus money out equation. The way that we've created our metrics, whether it be return on investment, whether it be a return on something else, has all been a function of fundamentally what can we gain in terms of more money, less money out, more money in. How can we reduce costs? How can we create profitability? And what I want you to realize is those can be important metrics. I'm not denying that we need to keep our eye on that ball. And we're missing the fundamental metrics though that actually are the leading factors in whether those lagging factors actually come to play. It's not about squeezing more out of a sponge or squeezing more out of the work that you're doing. It's not about this notion of hustle that has us going more and more and more and more and more, and this concept of how do we do more with less. All of that is creating a narrative that's creating sick cultures. There's a lot of cultural cancers that are spreading because we are burning people out in the process. The notion that people are expendable, which is the old leadership playbook. You don't like it, suck it up, we'll bring somebody else in. What you don't realize is that you are fundamentally not investing in your greatest asset. Your greatest asset is your people. Your greatest asset is the human capital of what you are pouring into and growing within your own organization. And I think about it, I want to share a couple examples of this so that hopefully this like lands for you. For example, one of the things that I've noticed in especially stepping away from corporate, but even when I was in my 20-year career in corporate America, it was always astonishing to me how much money was spent on recruiting, yet how little often is spent in the retention side of the equation. And so finding new clients, finding new employees, finding new business, all that money went into how do we attract more new. Yet nobody was looking at the underlying question of how do we keep what we've already brought in? How do we nurture and nourish and grow what's already in our wheelhouse, what's already in our organization, what's already on our profit lines? And so it was interesting. I had one company I was working with when I first stepped out, and I was doing some consulting and really helping sales organizations and marketing organizations look at some different things. I was actually kind of floored. I was working with a company back up in Milwaukee, and we were talking about their turnover rates. Their turnover was rather significant, and yet they kept putting campaign after campaign after campaign in place to recruit more, to hire better, to recruit new employees, to fix the turnover. And my question to them was, have you ever thought about what is required to keep the employees you bring on? When we looked at their bottom line, the amount of money they were spending in turnover was somewhere in the ballpark of $4 to $6 million a year, depending on any given year. Because the reality is the amount of money that it costs for recruiting, the amount of money that it costs to hire, select, the process around that, onboarding, not only is it onboarding said individual, it's also anyone on your team that now is not being efficient because it's tapping into their time to do training, to do joint work, to do a number of things that's helping that employee get on board, but it's any of the training, any of the development, whatever. At a bare minimum, and these numbers have changed significantly back then when we were looking at this example, at a bare minimum, a non management employee, so somebody that was more of an assistant, admin, maybe back office support, um, ran the company on average about 60,000, 50 to 60,000 ahead for every time they brought a new employee on board. Now, turnover means that money just walked right out the door. On the management side, we were looking at minimum 100 grand. So I want you to think about if your turnover rates are in the ballpark of, I mean, if your retention rates are in the ballpark of like 8%, 10%, that's 90%. And usually those retention rates are looked at over a 5 year, sometimes 2 year, 2 to 5 year period. That's 90% you're turning over. I'll let you do the math. I want you to realize how significant it is that when we are, if we are doing the due diligence to hire slowly and to hire with intention and to hire the right cultural fit, then it is our responsibility as leaders to nurture that human capital to get a real return on impact, on relationship, our own investment, their investment, but more times than not, we're missing that part of the equation. And so when we look at relationships being the new currency, I want you to realize that the exchange is trust. When you have micro fractures or micro cracks and the trust is eroded in your organization or it was never existed in the first place, you cannot have a culture that is rich in human capital. I will tell you that if you are not really looking at your culture from a people first relationship is the currency, you will inevitably and are slowly going broke. Because the truth is that it's your people, it's the energy of your people that are the heartbeat of your organization. And I get people say this. They will stand on their high horse and they will stand on their laurels and they will pound their chest and they will say it's a people first culture. Is it? Do you have a strong foundation of trust? Are you a leader? My favorite conversation I have with leaders, and I'm going to say this very facetiously. Are you a leader that's like, oh, well, my team needs to trust me? I'm going to tell you if that is where you stand and you believe that your team needs to earn your trust, you already have micro cracks you are not willing to name. Because here's the reality is that is actually an inverse proposition. It is not about you as said executive, you as said leader of team, you as the head of whatever is driving that culture's vision. It is not about the team, you earning the team earning your trust. It's about you earning theirs. This is without a doubt the biggest miss I see most leaders make is that they think the first priority is that their team needs to earn their trust. You will never have a foundation of trust if that is the way, if that is the lens you are looking at. It always starts. It's why people like Simon Sinek write books that say leaders eat last. It is always a function of you as a leader earning the trust of your team first. And I want to share with you a story that happened when I was still working in corporate and I had been promoted and moved into a new position. And I had inherited a team. Now, mind you, at the time, the person that initially had run this team, and I think I had talked about this in another episode, was an incredible bully. She was a tyrant. She was a bully, and she went against everything we said our culture stood for. At some point, there was a breaking point that, in fact, I had a pretty strong conversation with my boss at the time that said it was time for her to go, that we could not keep pouring into someone who obviously didn't want to be poured into and had no thoughts, no desire to actually put any kind of change into practice, and actually would brag about not only was she a bully, but so was her daughter who bullied a kid at school. So not a cultural fit. When I got promoted and moved into a new role, I inherited her team. And to say that there was an energy of brokenness on that team, a mild understatement. I can remember a specific individual who had literally grown up in the organization. She started right out of high school. She had moved into some very entry level positions and had moved into a specialist role. And when she came to me, quiet as a mouse, very withdrawn, and I knew something had to change. And so I remember because I asked some people what their thoughts were of her, and I got some pretty interesting reviews. People would tell me she was a rock star and that she was really brilliant and that never been given an opportunity to shine. And like there was a lot of people that actually sang her praises. And I had her former boss's performance review. So I remember our first meeting. I'm like, I need to do something drastic. If I'm going to earn her trust, hear what I'm saying, earn her trust as my employee who's in my direct care. Not she needs to earn my trust. Not I'm going to spout a whole bunch of things and she just needs to get on board and believe me. No, I want you to hear what I just said. I realized that I had work to do to earn her trust, to show her a level of consistency, to lean in with her and meet her where she's at, and that it likely was going to require something a bit drastic. So she came into our first development meeting, and I'm really clear, and I'll talk about this in another episode. One-on-one meetings and development meetings are two different things. One-on-one meetings are task-driven, operational, check the box. Are we getting what needs to get done to move this forward? Development meetings are just that. They are meeting your people where they are at to help them develop personally and professionally as the leaders that they are destined and have potential to be, with your guidance, support, and allowing them to make that conscientious choice to lift themselves up and to lift themselves and lean into a different level of leadership. So, that being said, we were sitting in my employees' development meeting, and I had a copy of her former performance review on the table on my desk where we were sitting. And she looked at it, and I could see the color draining from her face just with it being there. And I got quiet and I leaned in and I said, you know what? This this is just someone's opinion. I'm a believer of letting people tell me who they are. I get what it says in this performance review. And mind you, I'd made a copy of it, but I picked it up and I tore it and I tore it in a billion different pieces. And I said, I don't care what this says. I want to know who you are from what you choose to tell me. Yeah, that's one opinion, but I've also heard you're a rock star. I heard you're really good in communications. I heard you're really good at X, Y, and Z. And I want you to know that you have a choice, that you can choose to show me whatever, that we're starting from a blank slate. Now, me just saying that did not earn her trust. Let's be clear. It's not like all of a sudden she said, oh my God, Candy, you see me. I get it. Great. I now have a boss that's going to like really nurture and support me. No, she looked at me like I was crazy. She looked at me like, great, when's the other shoe going to drop? She looked at me like, I've heard that little song and dance before, and was like, okay. So then it was up to me to start to put that in practice. It was up to me to extend a grace and energy that said, I am going to trust her and I'm going to do everything required to earn her trust. That I am going to be consistent, that if I say this, this is how I am also showing up. That if I put this into practice, that I'm going to hold myself accountable to what I say I'm going to deliver for her and how I have her back and how I want her to grow. 4 months we went on this path. 4 months, monthly development meetings, and I didn't get the shift until one session. She sat in my office, and as I again showed up consistently with her, as I again leaned in to earn her trust, a little bit of the dam broke, and she shared something personal And I just let it land. And I held the space for her to see what would happen when she allowed herself that little bit of vulnerability. And I leaned in further. Truth, she started to cry. And she had a full meltdown in my office that I sat with her while she had that meltdown. My door was closed, and I let her release years of being bullied by her former boss, and probably a few more before that. I let her grieve all of what she was carrying, and I let her be seen. And I'm going to get emotional telling this. What I want you to realize is that moment changed everything. From that moment on, I got to see what everybody was telling me, how much of a rock star she was. So that at some point in that same year, I handed over my entire communication plan for our department, area, and function. I gave her permission to lead initiatives inside that space. And when it came time to for her performance review at the end of the year, and my bosses came to me. It was back in the days where we had the rack and stack, right? You can only have one E in your department, and everybody else has got to be subpar. And who's your top guy? Because you can't have more than one person being an ace on the team, which I had a team of rock stars. And I remember my boss coming to me and she's like, "Who's your E? Who's your exceptional?" And I gave her that employee's name. Her immediate response was, "But we don't give E's to specialists." And I said, "I don't care. You asked me who has had the biggest trajectory of growth on my team and who deserves it more than anyone. She does. And I will put my E, because I knew where I stood, I will put my E, my promotion on the line so that she gets her dues." And my boss looked at me, and thankfully I had my boss's support because my boss really cracked me open in the same way. She's like, "You going to hold firm on that?" I said, "I absolutely am going to hold firm on that." She said, "You willing to fight for it?" I said, "With all I got." We went to our executive VP. She said the same thing. I said, "I will fight for it. I will put anything and everything on the line for that." Because if you ask me on my team who had the biggest trajectory of growth and who leaned in and who showed me a deeper level of potential, there is nobody that even comes close. My executive VP and my boss fought the fight with me. And I will tell you, I'm going to get emotional on this. When it came time to tell her the status of her performance review, because don't even get me started on how that whole process is a bunch of bullshit. I'll talk about that another time too. But when I sat across from her and I got to not only tell her that she was receiving an E rating, I got to tell her what that meant in terms of a bonus and promotion as well, because she got promoted in addition to getting the E rating and getting her bonus. And I sat again with my employee and I cried with her. It was one of the most significant moments of my career to date. And that was 20 years ago. That is the difference when you realize relationships are the new currency. When you realize as a leader that your job, your role is to create a sense of safety, is to create a place for your people to feel seen, and is a place for you to demonstrate leadership, accountability, and consistency so that you earn your employee and team's trust along the way. She became one of my top employees, was my right hand. And even when I left corporate, she was promoted 4 times after that. The power of being able to lean in and lift up someone in their leadership. That is our job as leaders. It is about relationships first. It is about relationships being the new currency. It is about trust being the exchange of said currency. With that, this is Candy. And I want you to realize that our opportunity is to lead courageously, lead compassionately, and to lead consciously. Because if you are not investing in the real currency, which is your relationships, I promise you, you are going broke. I'll catch you on the next episode.